The scene opens on a misty, grey afternoon, the air thick and quiet as if even the birds are holding their breath. Eliza, a historian known for her bravery in uncovering dark secrets, steps cautiously up the winding path to Hollow Manor. This isn't any ordinary research project for her. It's a mission with a twist of fate, a journey that carries the weight of her own tragic past. Eliza's footsteps crunch on the gravel, echoing like whispers that seem to call her deeper into the looming estate. Hollow Manor stands tall and shadowed against the cloudy sky, its windows like empty eyes watching her every move. She pauses for a moment, gazing up at its crumbling walls, which hold centuries of untold stories. Something about this place pulls at her, like a long-lost memory just out of reach, both familiar and frightening. As she steps closer, the air shifts. It's almost as if the manor itself is breathing, alive with a past it wants her to uncover, or perhaps stay hidden forever. The silence grows heavier, pressing against her as she reaches for the large wrought iron door. For a second, she feels a chill down her spine, a warning maybe. But Eliza brushes it off. After all, she's here for answers, and a few creaking doors won't scare her away. Inside, the manor is dim, lit only by streaks of light filtering through dusty windows. Shadows cling to every corner, as if the darkness itself is hiding something. As she moves further into the grand, eerie hall, her eyes fall on the portraits hanging on the walls. Faces from the past stare back at her, each with an expression frozen in time. Sorrow, fear, regret. It's almost as if they're whispering secrets, secrets that only she can hear. Eliza's heart races, though she tries to calm herself. It's just a house, she tells herself, just a building with stories to tell. But in her gut, she knows there's something more, something deeper that might pull her into a world she might never escape. Her mind races with questions. Who lived here? What happened in these very rooms? And perhaps most pressing, why does she feel as though she's walked these halls before? As she takes another step, the faint sound of something creaking echoes in the distance. Eliza pauses, her breath catching as the feeling of unease grows stronger, pressing down like a shadow creeping over her. It's just the start, but already Hollow Manor is beginning to reveal its secrets. As Eliza explores the dark halls of Hollow Manor, the air grows colder, each room carrying an unnatural chill that seems to seep into her bones. She tries to ignore it, brushing it off as the draft of an old house, but as she moves from room to room, an unsettling feeling lingers, like she's being watched. Then she notices a portrait hanging in a shadowed corner, partially hidden by cobwebs and dust. The figure in the painting is a woman, her eyes dark and piercing, almost too lifelike, as if she's staring straight at Eliza. For a moment, Eliza could swear the eyes followed her, tracking her every movement, watching with an intensity that makes her skin crawl. She takes a step back, a shiver crawling down her spine. It's just a painting, she reminds herself, though her voice sounds small, uncertain. Moving on, she enters a grand, dimly lit library, its walls lined with ancient books, each spine worn and faded. As she steps inside, a faint whisper brushes past her ear, just on the edge of hearing. It's as if someone is muttering, close enough to touch, though no one else is in sight. The whispers grow a little louder, forming almost recognizable words, like ghostly breaths echoing through the stillness. Eliza's heart pounds as she looks around, trying to find the source, but the room is empty, the whispers fading as suddenly as they came. As she stands there trying to steady her breathing, a cold breeze drifts through the room, swirling around her. She wraps her arms around herself, but the chill seems to dig deeper, not just into her skin, but straight to her core. The air grows thick and heavy, pressing down on her as though an unseen presence is watching, waiting, ready to reveal something she's not sure she's ready to see. Eliza's eyes dart to a door at the far end of the room, slightly ajar. Curiosity pulls her toward it, despite every instinct telling her to turn back. She pushes it open slowly, wincing as it creaks, revealing a small, forgotten room cloaked in shadows. Inside, she notices an old mirror propped against the wall, its glass cracked and smudged with age. As she steps closer, she sees her own reflection staring back, but something is wrong. Her reflection seems off. It stares at her, unblinking, a subtle smirk curling at the corners of its mouth, a look she knows she didn't make. She gasps, stumbling back as her reflection flickers, and for a split second, she sees the face of the woman from the portrait smiling knowingly. Eliza's pulse quickens, her mind reeling. She turns quickly, the whispers growing louder now, almost like laughter, mocking her. She bolts out of the room, desperate to escape the suffocating air, her mind spinning with questions. What is Hollow Manor hiding? And why does it feel as if the house itself is reaching out to her, drawing her deeper and deeper into its secrets? Her fear grows, each small sound amplified in the silent corridors. Hollow Manor seems to pulse with life, with memories and mysteries that threaten to pull her under. Every door she opens, every shadow she passes, feels charged with something unseen, something waiting. It's as if the house has a story to tell her, and it won't rest until she hears every chilling word. As Eliza wanders deeper into Hollow Manor, she notices something unusual, a faint outline on the wallpaper, hidden behind an old armoire. Curiosity gets the better of her, and she pushes the heavy piece of furniture aside, her fingers trembling as she reveals an old, concealed door. It's small, barely noticeable, with a rusty handle that seems almost desperate to keep secrets buried. With a deep breath, Eliza turns the handle. The door creaks open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into pitch-black darkness. A damp, musty smell wafts up, the air thick with a staleness that makes her stomach turn. But she can't stop herself. Something about this hidden room calls to her, like a whisper she can't ignore. Slowly, she descends, each step echoing in the suffocating silence. Her flashlight barely penetrates the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the walls that seem to twist and writhe as she moves. At the bottom, she finds a small, cramped room, filled with bizarre artifacts that seem almost otherworldly. The walls are lined with dusty shelves, each one cluttered with strange objects. Worn-out dolls with blank, staring eyes, glass jars filled with murky liquid, and ancient relics covered in strange symbols she doesn't recognize. One shelf holds a collection of faded photographs, each one depicting different people who all share the same haunted expression, as if they're trapped in some unending nightmare. Eliza's eyes are drawn to a peculiar item in the center of the room. A tarnished, intricately carved box resting on an old wooden pedestal. The box is small and delicate, yet something about it feels overwhelmingly menacing. Her fingers hover over it, a chill creeping up her spine as she realizes it's ice cold to the touch. Her heart pounds as she carefully lifts the lid. Inside, she finds a collection of trinkets. A small locket, a brittle feather, a rusted key, and a piece of paper with faint scrawled writing that reads, "Once you see, you cannot leave." At that moment, the door behind her slams shut, plunging her into near total darkness. The flashlight flickers, and a sense of dread washes over her as she realizes she's trapped. The air thickens, pressing down on her, filling her lungs with a crushing weight. She starts to hear faint sounds, a shuffling, a soft scraping, and then a faint, chilling whisper that seems to come from every corner of the room. It murmurs her name slowly, as if savoring each syllable. Eliza, Eliza. Eliza's breath comes in gasps, her heart racing as panic sets in. She whirls around, searching for any sign of escape, but all she finds is darkness pressing closer, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. Shadows seem to creep across the floor, reaching toward her, stretching and twisting as if they're alive, hungry. Then the flashlight catches something, a shadowy figure lurking in the corner, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. It's barely there, more like an outline of a figure, but unmistakably human, standing deathly still, watching her with an intensity that chills her to the bone. In a moment of sheer terror, Eliza bolts for the door, her fingers fumbling against the cold, unyielding doorknob. Her breath catches as the figure inches closer, its movements slow, deliberate, savoring her fear. With a final, desperate twist, the door bursts open, and she stumbles out, her heart hammering in her chest as she escapes the suffocating darkness. She slams the door shut behind her, leaning against it, her body shaking from the encounter. But even as she stands there, safe for the moment, she can still hear it, the faint whispering echoing in her mind, a voice that now seems to be etched into her very soul. She realizes with horror that whatever lives within Hollow Manor, it's just getting started. Eliza stumbles out of the hidden room, her chest heaving, heart racing as she slams the door behind her. She leans against the cold wall, trying to catch her breath, hands shaking. The eerie whispers and that shadowy figure still linger in her mind, playing over and over. She presses her palms against her temples, forcing herself to calm down. It must be the isolation, she thinks. The cold, the darkness. It has to be. Taking a deep breath, she moves to the main hall, where the light is just a bit brighter, softer, filtering through dusty windows in gentle beams. She lets herself sink into an old armchair, trying to slow her racing thoughts. The silence around her feels thick, but it's a quieter silence, almost comforting in a way, compared to the oppressive feeling in the hidden room below. As her heartbeat steadies, Eliza closes her eyes, letting the room's stillness wash over her. She tries to convince herself it was all her imagination, that the whispers, the icy touch, even the flickering flashlight were just products of her mind playing tricks. After all, she tells herself, I came here to investigate legends, not to live them. The calmness of the room lulls her, allowing her mind to drift back to her purpose, to the resolve that drove her here in the first place. She's a historian, a seeker of truths, hidden by time and myth, and she's stronger than the fears that cling to the old walls of Hollow Manor. But even as she sits there, trying to ground herself, small details begin to chip away at her fragile sense of calm. A subtle draft brushes past her, colder than the rest of the air. A faint creak echoes from somewhere above, like footsteps pacing a distant hallway. She tells herself it's just the house settling, the typical groans of a building as old as this one. Yet, no matter how much she reassures herself, a nagging feeling tugs at her, like a tiny spark of dread that refuses to go out. In that quiet, Eliza feels the weight of the house around her, its stories, its secrets, its watchful presence. She opens her eyes, glancing around the hall. It's just an empty room, yet somehow she can't shake the feeling that she's not truly alone. She sits up, steadying herself, letting her resolve return. I won't let fear control me, she thinks. I came here for answers, and I'm not leaving until I find them. But as she stands, gathering her thoughts and preparing to move forward, a soft breeze rustles her hair, and she swears she hears it, just a faint echo of her name whispered on the air. It's almost gentle, almost soothing, but it leaves her chilled to the bone. Her calm has given her strength, but in the back of her mind, an unsettling realization lingers. Hollow Manor has a life of its own, and it's not done with her yet. As Eliza takes a deep breath, grounding herself, her gaze lands on an old full-length mirror leaning against the far wall. It's dusty and smudged, the glass warped with age. She almost looks away, but something about her reflection stops her cold. There in the dim glass she sees herself, or at least a version of herself. But her reflection's eyes are hollow, ringed with dark shadows, her skin pale and gaunt, like a ghostly apparition of her own image. Her reflection doesn't blink, doesn't mimic her movements. It simply stands there, staring back with a haunting, empty gaze, as if it's a completely different person, or something no longer human. She swallows, her breath coming in shallow gasps, fighting the impulse to reach out and touch the glass. The reflection's mouth begins to twist into a slow, unnatural smile, a smile that's sinister and entirely unlike her own. A chill spreads through her as the ghostly version of herself raises a hand, fingers curling in a mocking wave. Her own hand remains still, rooted by terror. Without another thought, Eliza turns and bolts from the room, her pulse pounding in her ears as she races down the hallway, desperate to escape the nightmare in the mirror. Her footsteps echo in the empty corridors, each sound amplifying her terror. She glances back, half expecting the figure to follow her, but the hallway behind her is empty, stretching into darkness. But as she rounds the next corner, her heart skips a beat. She's staring down a hallway that looks exactly the same. Identical walls, identical flickering light, identical eerie silence. Confused, she pushes forward, thinking she must have taken a wrong turn. She breaks into a run, her footsteps pounding against the floor, the air growing colder, heavier with each step. She reaches another corner, hoping for an exit, but is met once again with the exact same hallway, stretching out endlessly in front of her. Panic grips her as she realizes she's trapped, caught in a disorienting maze of identical hallways that seem to loop in on themselves. She darts from one hallway to the next, frantically trying door after door, but each one leads her back to the same corridor, as if the house itself is toying with her, guiding her in circles. As the minutes stretch on, her breathing grows ragged, her mind clouded with fear and exhaustion. Shadows begin to stretch and shift, twisting along the walls, whispering her name, mocking her desperation. She presses her hands against the cold walls, hoping to break free of this endless, nightmarish maze, but the corridors seem to shift around her, trapping her in a relentless loop. Just as she's about to collapse, she hears it. A faint, ghostly laugh echoing from behind her, growing louder, closer, filling the hallway with an icy dread. She glances over her shoulder, and in the distance she sees a figure slowly approaching. It's her reflection from the mirror, the ghostly version of herself, drifting down the hallway with a chilling, deliberate pace, that sinister smile still painted across its face. Eliza's heart races as she stumbles forward, but no matter how fast she runs, she can feel it gaining on her, the endless hallways twisting and folding in on themselves, closing in as the ghostly figure approaches. She realizes with horror that there may be no escape. That hollow manor has trapped her in a loop that might never let her go. Eliza stands frozen, her heart pounding as she watches the ghostly figure, a twisted version of herself, disappear into the shadows. Her mind races, desperate to escape the maze, to break free from Hollow Manor's relentless grip. She takes a few shaky breaths, convincing herself to press forward. The hallway is eerily quiet now, almost peaceful, the air heavy with stillness. For a brief moment, she feels a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe the nightmare has ended, that perhaps it was only her imagination spiraling out of control. She slowly makes her way down the hall, her steps tentative, each footfall echoing in the silence. But just as she begins to calm, she hears it, an almost imperceptible sound, like soft footsteps behind her, growing louder with each second. Her heart skips a beat as she turns, but the corridor is empty. The sound fades away, leaving her alone once again. She tells herself it's nothing, just her mind playing tricks, yet a gnawing sense of dread lingers, winding tighter around her nerves. Moments later, the calm is shattered by a sudden, loud banging from a nearby room, as if someone, or something, is trapped inside, pounding to be set free. She jumps, her pulse racing as she stares at the door, unsure whether to open it. The banging stops abruptly, and the silence that follows is deafening. Eliza stands frozen, her hand hovering near the doorknob, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on her. She takes a deep breath, pulling her hand away, choosing instead to turn and move down the corridor, hoping to find an escape. But as she walks, the hallway stretches on endlessly, winding like a maze, each turn leading her back to the same identical corridors. Frustration and fear gnaw at her, the calm moments between each encounter heightening her anticipation, making every shadow, every creak, more terrifying. She begins to hear faint whispers again, soft and distant, like a song she can't quite make out, echoing through the walls. Her name drifts through the air, spoken in a chilling, breathy voice that sends shivers down her spine. The moments of silence are deceptive, each one a lull before the next horror strikes. She finds herself in a small parlor, the room filled with antique furniture draped in white sheets, like specters watching her from all sides. She tries to catch her breath, but then she sees something, a faint figure beneath one of the sheets, motionless, almost human-like. Her hand shakes as she reaches out to lift the sheet, but just as her fingers brush against the fabric, a cold hand grabs her wrist. She gasps, stumbling back. But the room is empty, the figure gone as if it was never there. Panicking, she races back into the hallway, hoping to find her way out. But every turn, every door, leads her deeper into the heart of Hollow Manor. The patterns of calm are now twisted with horror, each quiet moment a trap, lulling her into a false sense of security before plunging her back into fear. Her mind teeters on the edge, frayed by the constant, relentless shifting between silence and terror. It feels as though the house itself is feeding off her fear, drawing her deeper into its clutches, each cycle of suspense pulling her closer to a point of no return. Just when she thinks she can't take it any longer, the calm returns almost mockingly, leaving her breathless and trembling. She stands in yet another hallway, the silence thick and suffocating, as if the house is savoring her fear, letting her linger in suspense. And as she steps forward, she knows, with a bone-deep certainty, that Hollow Manor won't release her until it has fully claimed her, mind, body, and soul. The endless halls seem to blur as Eliza stumbles through them, her legs trembling, her mind teetering on the edge of exhaustion. Every step feels heavier, as if the manor itself is sapping her strength, draining her will. But then, at the end of yet another seemingly identical hallway, she notices a door unlike the others. It's old and ornate, with dark carvings etched into the wood, symbols that feel ancient, forbidden. She feels an intense pull toward it, a sense that beyond this door lies the answer to the horrors she's endured. With a deep, steadying breath, Eliza pushes the door open. The room inside is vast and dimly lit, a twisted parody of an opulent study. An ancient dust-covered chandelier hangs from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows that dance across the walls. The air is thick and cold, filled with the scent of old parchment and something metallic, almost like blood. In the center of the room, a large, ornate desk sits under the faint light. On it lies a thick, leather-bound journal, its pages worn and yellowed with age. As she approaches, she notices that the desk is cluttered with strange objects, withered candles, empty glass vials, and an odd assortment of artifacts. She reaches for the journal, her fingers trembling as she opens it, flipping through pages filled with dense, spidery handwriting. The entries are cryptic, filled with details of ancient rituals and dark incantations. But one passage catches her eye, the words sending a chill through her entire being. To achieve eternal life, the souls of the willing are required, but when the willing becomes scarce, the unwilling shall suffice. Their essence shall fuel my existence, bound to these walls, eternal, unyielding. Eliza's breath hitches as the horrifying realization dawns on her. The owner of Hollow Manor had made a pact, a dark, twisted deal to trap souls within the manor's walls, sacrificing them one by one to sustain his own immortality. She reads further, her horror deepening as she learns the manor itself is a prison, an intricate web designed to ensnare and consume those who dare to enter. Just as she begins to process this revelation, the air in the room grows icy, almost stinging her skin. She hears a faint rustling behind her, like the soft, dreadful shifting of something waking from a long slumber. Slowly, she turns and sees a shadowy figure standing in the corner, shrouded in darkness. The figure steps forward, and as it emerges into the faint light, she sees him, the owner of Hollow Manor, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow yet burning with an unnatural, predatory gleam. He speaks, his voice a haunting whisper that seems to echo from deep within the walls. "Welcome, Eliza," he says, his tone dripping with malice. "You've uncovered my secret, and now you belong to Hollow Manor, like all the others." Eliza's mind reels, her instincts screaming at her to run, but her feet feel rooted to the floor. The figure steps closer, his hand outstretched, a grin twisting his face as he murmurs an incantation. Shadows begin to swirl around her, cold and oppressive, creeping up her legs, wrapping around her like shackles. She struggles, but the more she fights, the tighter the shadows grip her, pulling her closer to the floor, binding her to the very essence of the manor. The walls around her pulse, the faces of lost souls appearing in the wood, their eyes pleading, filled with despair. She hears their faint, desperate whispers, cries for release, each voice a chilling reminder of the fate that awaits her. Hollow Manor isn't just a house, it's a living, breathing entity, a monstrous creation born from the pact, feeding off the souls trapped within its walls. Summoning her last ounce of strength, Eliza tries to break free, to escape the horrific grip of the manor's dark power. But it's too late. The shadows pull her down, her vision blurring as she sinks into the floor, her body becoming part of the manor itself. Her last breath escapes as a shiver.